Let's look now at JavaScript. So JavaScript is actually used in the browser. Let's go ahead and bring up a JavaScript console in Chrome. And this now is a console, a REPL. So a REPL stands for read, eval, print, loop. So if you run Python, for instance, by itself, it'll give you a REPL where you can type in Python and get back for responses. It'll evaluate them. So it'll read in this case, JavaScript, evaluate it, print the result as a loop. So for instance, I can do something like 3 or 3 plus 4. And I'm not exactly sure how it is. It's, I guess, evaluating as I go, because you can see before actually at the return, it actually prints the intermediate value. I can do something like log. So I can log 3 plus 4, 2 times 5, and I get my results. Okay, so what it's doing here is the console.log both has a side effect, which is that it prints, and then it has a return result. In this case, the return result is undefined, so it's not actually returning a value. The types of values there are in JavaScript are, we have arrays, for instance. If we can assign, let's say, that array to a variable, and then I can say a at 0, a at 1, a at 2. I can take the length of a, so get that property from it. We, of course, have numbers, as we've seen. We have strings, which can be either in double quotes, or, as you can see, it's printing the result in single quotes. So you can also use single quotes. I normally tend to use single quotes. We have a null value and an undefined value. So the undefined value it would be used, for example, if we have a call a function that doesn't return a result. If a is 3, we can, for instance, do, addition or multiplication. We have shortcuts like in C, so a plus equals 3, or a minus equals 2, or something we don't have in Python, a plus plus, which increments a, and a minus minus. So a minus minus, let's look at the value of a. So a is 6. If we do a minus minus, it will decrement a, but it'll give us the value of a before the decrement. So this will print 6, but if I look at the value a, it's now 5. When you are declaring or using a variable, except in this REPL, you really should be using one of two things. You should be using either const, which declares that a, so has the value 3, but now if I try to reassign a, I get an error because it's constant. Alternatively, I can say, let's say b, let b equals 3. And now if I look at the value of b, it's 3, and if I now reassign b, I get a new value. That's fine. So when you're declaring variables, you either use const or let. There is an old style syntax called var, just don't use that. When you are using booleans, so there is a true value and a false value. So unlike Python, where those are uppercase. You can use and or, except it uses the C style syntax for that. So this is a Boolean and. So let's say true and false is false. True or false is true. So the pipe symbols, 2 pipe symbols are an or, and 2 ampersands are an and. The exclamation point is a not. When you're doing equality testing, you probably want to usually use the equals, 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 which is identity comparison. So for instance, if I say a equals, let's just look, a is 3 and b is 2, so I can say equals equals b, and it's false. However, if I said b equals 3, a equals equals b is true. The reason you want to use the equals equals equal, and if we say a not equals equals b, then that's false. Okay, so it is not the case that they're not equal. You want to use the equals 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 rather than smaller numbers of equals because of type coercion that'll happen otherwise. So if you have, let's say, the value 0, and you say, is this equal to the string 0? The answer is no. But if you say, is it just equal 0? The answer is yes. And that can get you in some deep trouble, having these automatic conversions that can happen. So basically what's happening here is the string 0 gets converted to a number if you happen to be comparing against a number. So my recommendation, use the triple equals or the not equals equals. We don't have a print statement. Actually, this can be quite confusing. So if you print 3, it's going to bring up a print dialog because it thinks you're actually trying to print from the browser. I have had this happen many times when I forget that in JavaScript, you want to use console.log. We have objects. Okay, so we can say, for instance, let's just say x equals, and then we can use curly braces, and then we can provide values. So we can say, for instance, age is 3, and name is John, and value is 72. So we can see this looks sort of like JSON. Whoops. Okay. It looks sort of like JSON. Notice also, by the way, that the console, when you print stuff out, actually lets you inspect it more. So let's just look at, let me make a Y that is similar. Age is 5, name is Sue, value is 65. And if I make an array now, notice that I can actually drill down into the result. So when I have a value in the REPL, I can actually investigate it. So I can look and see what the values are here. So this would allow me to dig down into some larger data structure. And let's just see whether that's the case if we do console.log. Well, the same thing is true there. So what we're getting out of console.log is not just a string, but actually an object that you can investigate. Okay, so let's go back to x. How do we get a value of x? Like, how do we get x's age? Can we see x.age? Yes, we can. Okay, x.name, x.value. We can also say x@age with a string here. I'm going to use single quotes. Okay. So if we tried this, it would try to evaluate age, and it would find age is not defined, so that's not good. So you can either do this, or you can do this. Okay. And of course, you can actually assign to, let's try that again. Okay. You notice the difference here. When I defined z, I actually didn't put quotes around age, whereas when I first created like y, I used double quotes around age. So what that shows is really you can choose to use those double quotes or not use those double quotes. So let's just look at i.age. Okay. You can test whether, for instance, there is a particular property, because these are called properties of objects. So you can say name in y, and you can say age in y. So let's try this, age in y. Yes. And no. So that can tell you whether a property exists. If you try to access a non-existent property, you get out undefined. Okay? So you do not get an exception thrown as you would in Python. One shortcut you might want to sometimes do is get the value from a particular property, or if that property is not there, get some other value. So you might say, for instance, y equals age 2 or 36, where 36 is going to be basically your default. So this says get the age 2 property from y, but if it's not there, just give me the value 36. Okay? Whereas if I take y.age or 36, I'm going to get out 5 because y.age is defined. So what happened here is y.age 2 is undefined. Undefined is false as far as Booleans are concerned, and so this gives us the value 36. Another thing that you might sometimes do, for instance, is let's say you have y, which has an array in it. Okay. So sometimes what you might want to do is get out the myArray and then index it. Okay. But if you try and index it, so let's do this. That works fine. But let's say you misspell or provide some property that's not there. Then you are going to get a runtime error, not in evaluating y at myArray at x, because that'll just evaluate to undefined. But it's when you try to index the index 1 of undefined, that doesn't work. So what might often be done here is something like this. myArray x, and then, assuming it's defined, myArray x at 1. So this is going to prevent the runtime error of trying to index into myArray x if myArray x isn't there. And so what we get is this is undefined. And so therefore, since this is undefined, it doesn't try to do the second part because it short circuits. If, on the other hand, we use the real array, then we correctly index into it.